Lately, I've been receiving a lot of questions about how do I manage software as a service, software licensing in ServiceNow. I will point out that what I'm going to cover in this video is only related to Istanbul and earlier releases of software asset management. The new software asset management coming in Jakarta, the approach would be a bit different. I will look to do a separate recording for that. So this is for Istanbul and earlier to manage software asset licenses for to manage software licenses for software as a service. And this is non-ServiceNow SaaS licensing. For the example, I'm going to use Cisco WebEx. Basically, what we're looking at here is when you work with software, in a typical scenario, you're working with software installations. So you would discover those software installations in the environment, and you would be able to use that information to determine if you're compliant for that software. But there's some software out there where you can't check the software installations to determine whether you're compliant. And WebEx is a good example of that. It doesn't matter where you find installations of WebEx. What matters is who's using it and how it's being used. So what we use for that in Istanbul and earlier is the software usages table. Now I'm going to just highlight this quickly. I'm going to do a quick group by display name just to show you what I've got currently in the software usage table. Right now, I've just got some details for Citrix Systems, iBusiness, and ServiceNow. This is just the demo data that's available in the system. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through the full range of how you can manage WebEx as the example for software as a service here. So within the software usage table, I'm just going to open up one of these records to show the details that are in it. We have some details here on what the software is. Citrix Systems iBusiness is the display name. The publisher, Citrix Systems, it's got a version and a primary key that gets generated using the display name publisher and version. The discovery model is something that ServiceNow creates automatically for each type of item. And then the other important information here is the usage information, what user is using it, perhaps where it was accessed from. And you may want to utilize some of this other information, such as duration or times used if it's available. But we'll look at last used or last scanned as a means for helping us with the licensing details in this particular situation. So let's take a look at the information that we need to import. I'm just going to move over here to Excel, where I had a template spreadsheet that I created, and I've brought in the data that I need for tracking WebEx. In this case, I put in the display name of WebEx, the publisher of Cisco, the version. If you're working with multiple versions of WebEx and you've got them licensed separately, you may need to work with that. The user that is using WebEx. Now this will need to match up with the display name for the user records, or you'll need to adjust the import set that I look at in a little bit. You may detail the accessed from. So you'll notice a couple of things here, like Wayne Webb. Wayne Webb is here multiple times. Wayne Webb has accessed WebEx from multiple computers. And this could be information that you get from the WebEx management console. You can export it out and bring it into the spreadsheet. Some of this data may just be consistent data that you put in to be able to create the records. And really what you're looking for is just a list of users and possibly the accessed from. And you may also leverage the last scanned information. So in this case, we can see that this was last scanned June 1st for a lot of these. Scrolling down, there's some where it was last scanned in May 1st and April 1st. and even May 15th. So different scan dates may be appropriate here as well in your situation. And what you can do with this last scan date is apply some details on the counter for when to count this. So if you check your count for WebEx on a monthly basis, you can have it scanned just for those situations where it was scanned in the last month to apply for your counters for WebEx. So we've got this data in the spreadsheet. We need to bring that information into ServiceNow. We'll do that just through an import set. So I'm going to go to Import Sets and load data. Now I'm doing this all from scratch here to give a sense of how this all fits together. I'm going to create a table. I'm just going to call it WebEx usage. I'm going to choose that file. My WebEx user data. And I'm going to submit that. It's going to read that spreadsheet into a staging table, an import table that we'll then use to map that data from that import staging table to the software usage table through a transform map. So I'm going to create this map, WebEx usage map. And it may be a more general map. I could have just called it software usage. I'm doing WebEx here, so I'm using that as a specific example. And the table we want is the CMDB SAM SW usage. And I'm going to auto map matching fields. That's going to help me out here. And because I created that template that I was working from right from the list, it was able to match up the details very easily for me. Now there are a couple things that I need to do here. One is that last scanned date. If I go, dates can be a little tricky on imports, and you want to make sure that the date format listed in the field map matches what's actually been brought in. And in this case, the default is to include hours, minutes, and seconds. We did not have that information in the last scanned field, so I'm going to change that to just use year, month, and day, and update that. The other thing you want to do here is make sure you've got your coalesce information set up properly. So identifying which fields should be used to merge the existing records. You don't want to end up necessarily with multiple records for the same user in the same month. So what you can do with that is identify the fields you want to coalesce on. We want to coalesce on user. And I'm going to get these all at once. I'm going to hold down Command here and select the fields that I want to update. I'm not too concerned. I'll do access from so we can maintain that information separately. We want the display name. We want the last scanned. And we use everything here. That's going to give us, make sure that all our records are unique. If it matches up, then it'll match for everything. Okay. Now at this point, we should be set to run the transform. So we're going to transform that data, bring it into the software usage table. Our transform map is selected, and transform. All right. With that complete, we should be able to go back now to our software usage table here. I'm just going to quickly filter out ServiceNow and filter out Citrix iBusiness. And what we're left with is the just the WebEx import information, that 242 lines of Citrix information, of WebEx information, excuse me, that we brought in to the system. I'm going to just drag this over to the side so that I've got it as a favorite that I can access later if I need to. And if I go into one of these records, you can see the details. So here we can see Beth Anglin accessed WebEx from Beth IBM. I'm not saying that this information is necessarily available from the WebEx console, but this should get the general idea across. Here we've got a discovery model for Cisco WebEx that was created automatically by ServiceNow to normalize this information. So the discovery model is going to be for any specific version of the software that you're working with. And in this case, all of those usage records are pointed to this same discovery model. Now on this discovery model, we have the ability, notice right now it's not yet associated with a model. So we don't have the ability yet to be able to add software licenses that identify how many software licenses we own for WebEx. And we don't have the ability to determine compliance for it, even if we had software licenses created. But right from this discovery model, we can create a software model encounter automatically. So I'm going to create that software model encounter. And it brings me to it created the software model, it created the counter. And right now, I am doing pretty well here. I've got a counter that I can start working with. But because we're working with software usage information in this case, a per workstation license type isn't the right way to be counting the rights used for this software. We need to be able to count it based on that usage information. And per workstation is based on installations on a workstation. So I'm going to just show you on the lookup list here that we've got a query table listed on these different software license calculations. And what we want to work with are the software usage ones. So we want to select one of these software usage. I'm going to just select usage user. It's going to count by named users on those usage records. So that used user field that we had in the software usage record, that's going to be what we count by. I'm going to save this. Now at this point, we could run a quick count of the licenses. And it's going to perform the count. It will typically refresh on its own when the count is done. If not, you can choose to reload the form and it will let you know. And you'll notice we had 242 lines in software usage lines, but our rights used is only 199. So we're not using, some of those users had access from multiple computers, and we were seeing that information reflected here, where we're only seeing 199 rights used. And we could verify that. I'm going to go back to that list of software usage, and I'm going to just group by user on this. And we can see when we group by user that we've got 199 unique users in that situation. And that's why we ended up with 199 in our counter for this. Now the next step is to create software licenses so that you can track that. So I'll go back to the counter. I'm going to go back to my WebEx counter. And actually, I'm going to go to software license. So under software assets, software licenses, I can create a new software license for Cisco WebEx. Can identify how many rights I own for this. Perhaps it's 205. If there were a license key, I could put it in. Always recommend putting in some sort of unique identifier as an asset tag. You could have that generated for you automatically. And software licenses should always be in a state of in use if they're active in the environment. I'm going to save this. Now, within the scope of this video, this presentation, I'm not going to get into the details, but you could use user entitlements to identify which users should have access to this, who's gone through the appropriate channels to request access and get access to WebEx within the environment. I'm not going to sit here and add them in. There are ways to streamline that, and that's covered in some other blog posts that I've done. So the next step, we'll go back to the counter for WebEx, and we'll redo that count. I'm going to count the licenses again. Once the count is complete, it did get updated this time automatically. We can see that we've got 205 rights owned, 199 of them are used, so our immediate compliance is 0. Now, one other thing on the counter before I go into the request of WebEx licenses, because that is another thing that has been asked about, and that is we had a usage condition where we might only want to count those WebEx accesses that happened within the last month or last 2 months. In this case, because my spreadsheet had slightly older data than today's current date. And so with that in mind, we may choose to set a software usage condition on that last scanned date. And I'm just going to do on last month, but I might want to actually say this month if I had more up-to-date data, so that it's only counting it for software that's scanned this month. And what you're going to see now, I'm going to save this and then count my licenses again. It's going to count those licenses. And you'll notice now we're only using 128 rights. So some of those usage records were a little older. And what you'll see is over time, these counters run on a nightly basis. And over time, I'm going to just reload the form so that I get the related lists updated down below, is there's going to be a new counter history record. That counter history record, you can see over time, you want to sort it by last completed, so you've got the newest at the top, but you'll be able to see over time how your rights usage changes. And if it's counting on a per month basis, you'll be able to see how those numbers are fluctuating. You can use that information for planning your licenses and determining details about that. Now, one last thing here is I'm going to publish this to the catalog so that users can request access to WebEx. So in the software model record, and this is a software model record that was created automatically, we could identify what's the cost, monthly WebEx charge. We can save this We can identify on the product catalog any details about this, provide a description for what somebody would get with WebEx. I'm more concerned right now with just publishing this to the catalog so that you can see this. I'm going to put it in the software category. And it's going to take me to the catalog item for this, for Cisco WebEx. Notice it automatically put in a price. I could also set it to be a recurring price instead, because it is a recurring price. I want to set a workflow. I'm going to go with the procurement process flow software. This is just a default workflow that you can utilize for software. And notice you can identify delivery time and other details on the catalog item here. I'm just going to save this and show what the process looks like as you go through here. So let's try it. I didn't add any special details, so there's not a lot of information to see here. I'm going to order it now. And now with our procurement plugin activated, there is a request created that's going to have a task for someone to perform. Got a catalog task to source the requested item. And with software, the way this looks, the procurement group would see this task in their queue. They can source the request, and they can see that there's one to be sourced, that there's 205 available rights. In this case, there are 205 available rights because none of those rights have been allocated to other users. So we can, but this will add an assignment, that entitlement for the software. We can select the license. If we had multiple purchases of WebEx, we'd see those different purchases and the available rights on those purchases. And then we can identify the user to allocate it to. Abraham Lincoln's this could be assigned automatically to the person who made the request. Submit that. And there you have the process. When it's done here, you can even run the software counter for the associated software model so that it updates the record automatically for WebEx. And if we go back to that software counter for WebEx, we'll see some details, some things happening. From that high-level view, we still have 128 rights used. The fact that Abraham Lincoln's been assigned that doesn't mean that he's using it yet. And down in the software counter results is where we'll see the details on those items. So down below here, we can see that we still have 204 of those rights that are not allocated to anybody. We have 128 usages of WebEx in the environment that are not entitled. Those rights have not been allocated to anybody. And there's that one that we assigned to Abraham Lincoln that has not been found to be in use yet. So just a quick recap, because we are working with software here where the licensing is not based on software installations, we use the software usage table to track that information, to track those details. We can pull the details out of our management console for whatever tool we're looking to track the software for. In this case, we worked with WebEx. We had the details brought into a spreadsheet that we then imported. It could be a standard import for your different software as a service licensing. Bring those details in, make sure you've got your model and counter created, create your software licenses, do your count, and you can even publish it to the software, the service catalog as a software catalog item that users can then select and be granted access to that software. I hope you found this useful, and please feel free to post any questions in the ServiceNow community. If you need to, you can tag me just with an @bsweetser, and I will watch for questions coming through and happy to answer as I can.